Today I'm going to discuss about various reproductive strategies in animal kingdom. The story of life in Earth is a story of change over time, the process which generated incredible biodiversity of the planet, the process we call by the name evolution. So many biologists have tried to explain the phenomenon of evolution, but in 19th century, two British scientists, Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, independently arrived at the same conclusion that the evolution happens through natural selection. The theory could explain the constantly changing nature of life to better adapt to reproduce in constantly changing environments. See, there is a very popular example of some birds, like we can call it as Darwin's finches. Similar looking birds have adapted their beak for living to coexist in a heterogeneous environment of Galapagos Islands. And this radiation and this adaptation, we can call it as adaptive radiation. So we are talking about the adaptation of organism. In Darwin's word, it is the fitness of the organism. Richard Dawkins is a famous writer and a scientist who, through his famous book, The Selfish Gene, has said that organisms are survival machines. Reproduction is the key element or key feature of evolutionary fitness of the organisms. So the reproductive strategies also is a product of evolution. From the dawn of life of Earth, several strategies have been employed by the organism to survive, to enhance their adaptability, to live in changing environments. So as we are discussing about the various reproductive strategies which is going to enhance the reproductive fitness of an organism, let us have a look on what is a reproductive strategy. A reproductive strategy is a structural, functional, or the behavioral adaptation of an organism to enhance its fitness, to enhance the chance of fertilization, or to increase the adaptable value of an organism. See, the ultimate goal of every organism is to have maximum number of surviving offsprings with spending least amount of energy. We can call it as a reproductive effort. So reproductive effort means to produce maximum number of surviving offspring by spending least amount of energy. So they are saving energy to produce maximum number of individuals. See, we have to go back to the basics of reproduction to understand it more clearly. See, basically, the reproduction can be divided into two that we all know: asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction means the one parent can produce a progeny which is genetically very similar or identical, and we can call that progeny as a clone. Genetically identical clone. And in case of sexual reproduction, it is different. Two parents are involved there, and two parents produce progeny which is genetically distinct from their parents, and we can call that progeny as offspring, and we can call that individual as offspring. So in asexual reproduction it is clone, and sexual reproduction it is offspring. So so many costs are associated with this sexual reproduction rather than asexual reproduction, because asexual reproduction is a very simple method of reproduction which is employed by lower forms of life. So it can multiply, it can produce very identical clones, but it is, as I said earlier, it is genetically very similar or exact photocopy of that parent organism. So we need genetic variability to enhance or to generate diversity. So we are focusing more towards the sexual reproduction. Now it is evident that sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction has got several differences, and the sexual reproduction is very much essential for creating the diversity of life on Earth. And sexual reproduction need three major components. First one is the mating type or the sexes of organism, male and female counterpart. Second one is the specialized organ for producing sex cells, that is known by the name gonads. In case of female it is ovary, and in case of male it is testis. And third component is gametes or sex cells, which is dimorphic in nature. You can see here there is a sperm which is a gamete of male, which is very small and is having a flagella for motility, and the female gamete is very large and it is immotile, that is known as ova or egg. So, as discussed now, we need three components for sexual reproduction. One is the mating type of sexes, second one is the gonads, and third one is the specialized sex cells, which is dimorphic in nature, which is known as gametes. So let us have a look on different types of fertilization. So I haven't mentioned about fertilization, and fertilization is the fusion of male and female gamete. So female gamete and male gamete comes closer together to fuse as a diploid zygote. That process is known as fertilization, also called as synchrony. And after the fertilization, the zygote will divide through cleavage, differential cleavage, and then it will transform into an embryo, later on into a fetus, and emerge out or spawn out as a individual, little individual. Okay, let us have a look on different fertilization methods. First, I will explain about the strategy which is employed by fishes and frogs, like semi-aquatic and aquatic animals. They employ external fertilization strategy. So external fertilization strategy or spawning means simultaneous release of gametes of male and female in the medium where it lives, and it comes closer for fertilization, but it is less controlled manner. So there is some limitation for the external fertilization, that it may not be possible for all the gametes of male and female to fuse together. So we have a less control over the external fertilization, and the medium is very much essential. In case of aquatic animals, the watery medium helps the male gamete to propagate towards the female, and also it protects from the desiccation of eggs and or even the gametes. But here in the external fertilization, there is another mandatory thing, like gametes need to be very high in number, because for the success of reproduction it is very much essential. In contrary, there is another strategy which is known as internal fertilization. Internal fertilization is a fertilization event which is evident in terrestrial animals. In case of reptiles, we can take an example of reptile. What happened is they developed a specialized organ for transferring the male gametes into female reproductive tract. That genital is known as the copulatory organ. So through the copulatory organ, male can transfer the male gametes to female genital tract, and the fertilization is taking place over there inside the female body. And that kind of fertilization is known as internal fertilization. I am talking about the second strategy after discussing about the first strategy, that is external fertilization. So it is better evolved strategy, internal fertilization. Here the fertilization or synchrony is taking place inside the female body. But remember one thing, there is an additional organ which is known as copulatory organ or genital. Okay, so that is about the internal fertilization. Now we will look at the different methods of growth or development of embryo. See, in some cases the embryo will grow inside the body of organism, or in some cases embryo will grow outside the body of female organism. Those conditions in which the embryo will mature or grow or develop outside the female organism, we can call it as oviparity. It is developing inside an egg. You can see here in the picture, there is an egg which is covered by a cladoid shell. Cladoid means shelled apparatus. Inside that there are 4 extra embryonic membranes. Chorion is there, allantois is there, amnion is there, yolk sac is there. So yolk sac is providing nourishment for the growing embryo inside. And that cladoid egg or shelled egg protects the egg from the harsh environment of terrestrial mode. And later on, this strategy, which is popularly known by the name oviparity, which was employed by reptiles, birds, and so many lower forms also, but it is not cladoic. later replaced by another strategy which is known as viviparity. Viviparity is evident in mammals. See, in mammals, as the embryo is growing inside an egg outside the female body, least protection can be expected. But in case of another strategy, that is viviparous strategy, giving birth strategy, which is employed by higher group of animals, that is mammals, there is a specialized chamber inside female body, which is known as uterus, which helps the embryo to grow and develop. And in that uterus, there is a placenta, which helps to give nourishment to the embryo and also to exchange the gases between embryo and mother's blood, and the elimination of nitrogenous waste products from the body of fetus or embryo is also possible through this placenta circulation. So placenta is acting as an intermediate form between the mother's blood and fetal blood or embryo blood. So it is a better advanced strategy to protect the developing embryo. So this is called viviparity. And after that, it will give birth to the individual organism, infant organism. And as far as we have discussed right now, the difference between oviparous strategy and viviparous strategy. Oviparous strategy means the embryo is developing externally, or external gestation method, and viviparous strategy is the embryo is developing inside the female body, that is internal gestation method. And now we will discuss about the development of the young one. In the initial period of development of young one, we can call it as critical period. Some individuals, some young ones can defend themselves just after birth. We can call it as precocial animals. Most of the ground birds also shows this behavior. It can defend itself just after birth. So it is an adaptive, what we can say, like it is an adaptation for that kind of animals to survive in very harsh environment. And there is a contrary thing also. There is another kind of development which is known as altricial. In this case, the individual, newly born babies cannot defend themselves. So they have to rely on the parental care by their parents. So parents has to exhibit parental care to protect these easily susceptible young ones. So this is called precocial and altricial strategies of development. So far we have discussed about the strategies of fertilization, that is external fertilization and internal fertilization. After that we have discussed about the oviparous condition and viviparous condition, and after that we have discussed about the precocial development and altricial development. Now we will look at the more complicated strategies of animal behavior. One is the RNK strategy of behavior. RNK strategies of behavior is totally different kind of behavior in which the number of individual offspring formed is counted. See, here in the case of human and elephant, that is mammal of course, what happens is their maturity period will come not directly after their birth. It will take some time, and they produce very few individuals, and they will take care of them for a longer time. So they will exhibit a parental care for that. And that kind of strategy is known as K strategy. Okay, there is a second strategy which is known as R selection strategy. R selection strategy happens in invertebrates. We can take the example of insects. In insects, we can see there are a lot of offsprings are there, and they reach their sexual maturity very soon after hatching, and after that they spend very little time for caring their young ones, because there is a probability for losing their life, their individual life, in a very harsh environment or changing environment. So they have to produce as much individuals as possible, as much offsprings as possible for their survival value. So that is called R strategy. Now we will talk about some different strategies based on how many times a parent give birth to babies, or how many times a parent produce their next offspring, next generation offspring. And that strategy is known as semelparous and heteroparous strategy. For the semelparous strategy, I would say an individual organism reproduces only one time in their life. One time reproduction in their life, and that is called semelparous. Here we can see the example of salmon, Pacific salmon over there, and very basic organisms like some plants is showing this kind of strategy. They will reproduce only one time in their life, and in contrast, there is another strategy which is known as heteroparous. Heteroparous, we humans including in that heteroparous conditions, like we can reproduce many times in our lifetime, like human beings and other higher animals can reproduce many more times, and that is heteroparous condition. So these are the different strategies for having how many times an animal reproduces. So far we have discussed about so many strategies of development, reproduction, fertilization, so many things. All belongs to the strategies of reproduction. We are talking in terms of evolution too. Now I want to discuss about some particular animals which is of more sluggish nature or more sessile nature, like earthworm, snail, like that, or some mollusk. And in that case, two sexes are not seen. Both sexes are seen in the same individual. Zoologists call that kind of animals by the term hermaphrodites. So the hermaphrodites are animals which contain both sexes. It includes, for example, earthworm, snail, etc. So sometimes these hermaphrodites have a special tendency to change its sex whenever the need is arising. We can take the example of clownfish. You might be very familiar with the clownfish. Like there's a character called Nemo in a movie, very popular movie, Finding Nemo. In that, this kind of fishes is having a peculiar nature. Zoologists call it as sequential hermaphroditism, in which all individuals of a colony will be in a single sex initially, that is male, and when time arrives for reproduction, the most dominant male will turn into a female, and this condition is known as proanthrous condition. So initially all the members of the colony will be male, and most prominent male will switch over to another sex, female, and then reproduces. And this type of phenomenon is known as sequential hermaphroditism. And especially in this condition, it is proanthrous condition. Prot means initial, anthrous means male. So initially they are all males. And example is clownfish, Nemo, remember. And second condition is protogynous condition. Protogynous condition, all the individuals of the colony will be initially female, and the most dominant female will switch over to another sex of male when the need is arised. And gobies are famous for this kind of sex change from female to male, or protogynous condition. Proto means first, gynous means female. So the first female generation turns to a male. Only one individual will turns to a male, and that will be the dominant female of that colony. And there are certain organisms in nature associated with the corals which can change their sex in bidirectionally, in two directions. So bidirectional sex change can be evident in a specific fish which is known as Gobiodon histrio, which is a coral fish which can change its sex in two ways. So this is an amazing kind of world we are living in. There are a lot of reproductive strategies we can see around us, and here is an introduction of all the reproductive strategies which is known till today. Thank you so much for listening me patiently. Thank you.